Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Beckie Nelson, the founder of Balanced Office Solutions, a bookkeeping and business advisory firm that exists to unleash entrepreneurs from the confusion and complexities of business and finance. Offering both strategic and hands-on support that empowers executives to make confident decisions for growth and success, Balanced Office Solutions is a backpocket CFO and trusted business advisor in one. Beckie, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ashley. I'm super excited to be here today.
I am excited to have you here. For our listeners, we will have a more descriptive bio for Beckie in the show notes that you can see kind of like the full scope of what she does. But why don't you start off by telling us more about you and what you do?
Sure. So I opened Balanced Office Solutions as just a single DBA person about 12 years ago after I got laid off from a job. And I was typically doing operations and accounting. And I just saw like this need in the industry for somebody who can come in and do bookkeeping and operations support for smaller to medium-sized businesses that really didn't have the opportunity to hire somebody full-time or even need that. So that's kind of where this started. Typically, people have these brilliant stories about how they had this genius moment. There was no genius moment. I just was laid off and I needed something to do. And I really have always had that entrepreneur spirit. I did not want to go back and work for somebody in an office. And so it kind of morphed out of a necessity and also, knowing that the industry really needed somebody to be able to simplify what was going on in their business and talk to them about it. So
Yes, I love that. And can you talk more about how you support your clients through BOS and also like what types of services specifically that you support them with?
yeah, sure. Thank you. So we do monthly bookkeeping. We do quarterly DIY bookkeeping, which means that if the client is good at doing their own bookkeeping, we do reviews. I review their accounts, and they're able to do their own bookkeeping for those smaller businesses that don't need a full-time or even a part-time bookkeeper. I do advisory services and CFO services. I do QuickBooks training, both in desktop and online. And we offer some operations support, whether it be simple HR, payroll. I do get my hands into operations like project management and setting up either an Asana or a ClickUp for clients, but I tend to try to steer clear of that just because it seems to be a lot of extra work from a perspective of where my time is being taken to make sure that my clients financially are taken care of. And yeah, so we support sort of from basic all the way through full charge bookkeeping. And I think that from my perspective, it's good to have somebody or a firm that can do all of the above and not just one piece, because my background shows a lot from a knowing all of the intricacies of the workings of the business to kind of piece all of the pieces together to get a holistic view.
Yes, and it sounds like too that from the wide scale that you offer of services that your clients, or you can also grow with your clients. Like as your clients grow, you're able to continue to offer deeper services and more services based on what they need at that point in their business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have a lot of clients that have grown with us over the years. You start off as a great idea, side business, you then quit your job, go into business, and then you start to kind of hire and make other business decisions and grow. And that's really where we shine from start to wherever you want to be going. We work with, a few $100,000 a year businesses all the way to $5 million businesses. So.
Yeah, which is nice to be able to adjust as needed and be able to flex in that sense. And
Yeah.
so for me personally, I feel like bookkeeping is one of those things that I'm like, why didn't I outsource that sooner? Like, why didn't I delegate that sooner and give it up sooner in my business? And I think it's so important for business owners to realize that it's one of those things where it eventually gets to the point where you can't and shouldn't be doing it all on your own. And so could you talk more about the importance of or benefits of a business owner being able to bring in an expert like yourself to handle that leg of their business?
Yeah, so that's great. So most people don't want to hire, I think initially it may be a mixture between two things. One is finance, right? And two is finance. And what I mean by that is a mentality thing where, oh my goodness, I don't want somebody to see. And so they feel judged. The one thing that I have as a firm and have always had is that we are super non-judgmental. I've had people come to me with buckets of receipts and no accounting to somebody who has it all together and they're very clearly, organized with all of their stuff. I think that the ability to hire an expert so you are in compliance and that person can speak to you in the language in which you need them to speak to you. I've had some CPAs who go to business owners and the business owner hangs up and calls me back and says, what did they just say? And so one of the things that I love to do here is like simplify the context of what we're talking about and doing that in a way where businesses really can shine in the way that they want to shine. Most people eventually hire an expert because exactly what you said, Ashley, is like they just don't have time to do this anymore. You get to the point where you're doing all the things as a business owner. Even for me, it's hard. I hate delegating, right? But I think so Ashley, you're a social media person. I think the first thing I offloaded was my social media because
Yeah.
it was just something I didn't want to do. I wasn't good at it. I didn't want to spend the time. And I noticed that I wasn't getting what I needed to get from my social media. And I think from a bookkeeping standpoint, if you don't know your numbers and you don't have somebody that can have a candid conversation with you about where you're at in your business, and you trust to go to them to ask them questions, is like not benefiting, even if you're the smallest company, because you need to know where you stand and you need to know what you owe in taxes. Most people come to me because April 15th or March 15th, depending on what you're structured as, came around and they owed a ton of money in taxes and they panicked because they didn't understand and have somebody that was able to do the general bookkeeping, like the compliance piece, but also the advisory piece so that they could understand where they're at in the year so that they could mitigate that issue at the end of the year.
Yes, and that reminds me of the whole idea of you don't know what you don't know. So it's like you may just be doing something if you're doing your own bookkeeping because you think that's what you should be doing or you think that's what's right. And then it turns out they're actually something you could be doing better. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits of hiring someone like yourself is, like you said, Becky, come right in and explain things in a more simple term and really be able to give you those strategic insights and advice on what you can do to improve your numbers and also make smart choices.
Yeah, I think it's important. I was on a call earlier with a potential client and, she doesn't have an accounting system at all. And she's been giving her accountant access to the bank accounts, and the accountant has been basically just doing the books from exporting an Excel spreadsheet. And while that works fine-ish, you don't know your numbers on a month-to-month basis. And she's like, even for me, it would be great to see those numbers because it also pushes me to have better goals, right? So if you think you're performing at, let's say, $500,000, by August, that was one of your goals, or $200,000, whatever the goal amount is. And now you're realizing that you're only at $100,000 gross profit in that time frame. It sort of pushes you also to make new goals for the second half of the year and to be able to have, a different push. I'm very financially driven. Maybe this is why I do that for a living. I have no idea, but it pushes me when I see my numbers drop or my expenses go up. I am consistently looking at my numbers because I know how important it is as a small business.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I love that point that you brought up about being goal oriented. Like when you kind of have that information beside you, then it allows you to make different choices or adjust as needed based on where you see kind of where you're at with your progress with your goals during the year. And maybe you're doing way better than you anticipated for yourself and you can adjust. But I love that point that you bring up of just being able to benchmark yourself and kind of get a feel for how things are going each day so you really know where you stand.
Yeah, I think without that information, it's really hard to run a business, right? You're kind
Mhm.
of just flying by the seat of your pants. You don't really know what your income is. You don't know what your expenses are. You can look at a bank account all day, but the other thing that people I find don't really understand is just because your bank balance says something does not mean that that's what your overall net profit is. So there's a lot going on in accounting where you need to be looking at a lot of different angles for things. And I think people don't know what they don't know. Again, I don't know what I don't know with social social media. So I hired somebody to do it because I thought it was important. And that's how we grow and learn and are able to focus on what we love. Most business owners, unless you own a bookkeeping or accounting firm, right, didn't get into business because they wanted to do their own finances.
Yes, a very good point. And I know that one leg of your business too is offering that business advisory like specialty or those services that you have. So could you talk more about what that is specifically and how it benefits business owners?
Absolutely. So advisory work is specifically the sort of ability to take into perspective cash flow statements, budgets, cash flow projections, goals of the business owner, and goals in general personally, because I think as small business owners, for most of us, our personal goals and our business goals are intricately entwined, right? Like, you know, you need to pay your own bills as well as pay all the bills for your business, and take a look at all those and start to really emphasize where you're doing well, where we need to cut back. What is your debt? Where can you pay those off? What are the things and goals that you want? You know, do you want to buy a new computer, or are you a larger business and need to buy a piece of equipment, like, you know, you're in construction, a backhoe, a trailer, etc., but you don't have the funds for that? And really talking to the individual companies and see where I can help them determine where their money is best spent, where to save it, what debt is good debt, what you know, what debt can we pay off, and really just get a holistic view of that and help them grow the company in the direction that they want to grow.
I
So it's
love
kind
that.
of like a mixture of financial analytics and business coaching, which I think is, the word coaching is terrible in right now, but in general, you get where I'm going. It's having
Yes.
like a consultant that you can, you know, chat with and figure out, you know, how to get to your end goal.
Absolutely. And it sounds like part of that conversation too might be when it's time to raise prices. I know that's something that I personally struggle with, is knowing when to raise prices and how much to raise prices by, and then how and when to communicate that to clients. But when you come in with your clients and you're able to really take that deep dive into their numbers, you might be able to give them a nudge and say, hey, you're underselling yourself. You need to raise those prices. And that's a great way to kind of just also work with business owners too, because sometimes we need that nudge.
Yeah, I think we all need that nudge, me included in that. But yeah, it's a good way to kind of take a deep dive. We're not just looking at one thing, but we're looking at all the things. And typically, a lot of business owners undersell themselves for sure. You know, it's important to have that, you know, and it's important to know what, you know, the industry benchmarks are for your industry. And so that you're not super overpricing and you're definitely not underpricing yourself. And whatever value you're providing to your clients is in the pricing that you're charging for sure.
Exactly. And so when a business owner is looking to work with someone like yourself, what should they have ready to be able to work with a bookkeeper? Like you mentioned the potential client you spoke with earlier who was just granting access to their bank account and whatnot. Is there anything that you recommend people have set up or set in place in order to really get started and get the ball rolling?
So I think there are many different types of people that you're speaking about. So there's the person that doesn't have anything set up. And as a firm myself, we do set up QuickBooks, get people rolling, and do what I call project work, which is going back to the beginning of the year and getting your books up to date. So there's that type of client. There's the client that has their bookkeeping done, but maybe they thought that they could do QuickBooks and it was easy, and they figured out maybe this isn't as easy as I thought it was. And so, you know, taking a client like that, reviewing and doing a diagnostic review and getting them into a project. And then there's the clients that have, you know, full accounting systems. They've already had somebody in their books, or, you know, they have the knowledge to be doing their books and reconciling everything. And so I think there's different perspectives on where you're coming into the game, Ashley, but typically I would say, uh, you know, make sure that you talk to somebody about what accounting platform you want to be in. As a firm, we specifically work in QuickBooks Online, you know, have read-only bank access. I typically don't take people's usernames and passwords anymore. Almost every bank, I should say, has read-only access. And just, you know, we work very differently. I try to get to know my clients so that I don't have a ton of questions for them. make sure you're keeping your paper receipts. Please don't throw those out. There are some things that typically we would say, but I think the banking access and having an accounting system, whether that be in Excel that provides you a P&L on a monthly basis and not at the end of the year, is a different story. But essentially, I think, those are just general things, rules of thumb, keep your receipts. We're not responsible as bookkeepers to keep your receipts. I've had people say, well, we gave them to you in either Dext or Google Doc or whatever it is. And I'm like, yeah, but you still have to keep those. Like, it's your responsibility. I'm not, if somebody requests those from me, I don't have them, you have them, kind of thing. So I think in general, just keeping yourself as organized as you can be for a bookkeeper to potentially take over your books is, is key. And one thing I want to address briefly is please don't commingle your funds. I understand how hard it is. I do. As a business owner, I get it. I didn't come from, well organized right off the bat. I've learned over time. But the one thing that I did to set myself up for success at the beginning of my business, no matter how small I was, is that I had a business bank account and I only used that bank account for business things. Because commingling really makes it difficult for you, your CPA, and if you're going to hire a bookkeeper, it's impossible for us to figure out what's personal and what's business without you, either us asking you a million questions, which we don't want to do, or you submitting a receipt for every single item to tell us whether it's personal and business. And I'm sure as a business owner, you're busy with family and friends and you want to have a life outside of your business, and we don't want to, bother you with all that stuff as well.
Exactly. And that's great advice too, is to just keep things separate, because it also might, if you have it commingled, it also might skew the data in terms of you not really having accurate understanding of how well or where you could be improving in your business. Is that if everything's all just mixed together, I feel like it probably makes draws a finer line or makes things more clear and provides more clarity about where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that most people kind of start off that way because it just works that way. But within the first 6 months of your business, or even right off the bat, I try to give people a reprieve, right? Like, okay, 6 months in, let's talk about why you're still commingling. But realistically, right off the bat, you should be doing that because it's definitely challenging your numbers. And also, if you ever want to hand that off to somebody else because you don't want to be doing it, again, as a professional, in an expert in the field, we still can't tell what's what. And from a compliance standpoint, it just doesn't benefit the company or the person at all.
Exactly. And one of the tools you mentioned that you use is QuickBooks. And so I want to dive a little bit further into that, because I know that's something business owners often think about, is which payment processor they should use, whether it's QuickBooks, FreshBooks, or a Stripe integration through their CRM. I mean, there's so many choices. Could you talk about why you believe QuickBooks to be such a great fit for small business owners?
Oh, Ashley. So
Are you going to need more time to answer this?
I'm gonna need more time to pick that up. But I will say that I don't think QuickBooks is for everybody. I just learned in QuickBooks, and so that's the only thing I've really ever known. But like you said,
Gotcha.
there's FreshBooks, there's Xero, there's Wave, which is free. In some cases, the CRMs, Honeybook, Dubsado, et cetera, claim themselves to be like an accounting platform-ish. I will tell you that I stick with QuickBooks because I just know the platform. It has a lot of quirks. People think it's easy. It's not. It challenges me 25 years plus into this. And so, it's just what my background is. I don't find it to be the most cost effective, although they are putting out simpler programs for people who don't need access to that is more cost effective, but it is the easiest thing for me to teach somebody else how to do. So if you hire somebody, we set you up and you're like, I want to DIY my bookkeeping, I offer QuickBooks training sessions to teach you how to use the platform because I'm just an expert at the platform. So I think QuickBooks is great for most businesses based on the ease of use. And the most widely used platform. And so if you're switching to another bookkeeper, or if you're switching to another CPA, they have access to these. You can give your accountant access to this, where in some of the other platforms, it's much more difficult to give access. So if the CPA wanted access, it's kind of impossible. So I think it's just the most widely used platform, to answer your question, Ashley. I'm not sure. It's, I know people who love Xero. I have a couple of colleagues that that's all that they work in, and that's something that they love, but also they started in the industry with Xero. So again, it's their favorite because that's where they started. So
Yes, that makes sense. And that's actually a good thing to know is like there's all these different options to consider and really figuring out what you like the best and what you feel the most comfortable with. But when it comes for people to kind of like pick the accounting system that they're using or the accounting software that they're using, is there anything in particular that they should look out for or features that you would recommend that all accounting softwares or systems should have?
yeah, so I don't think it's a one-stop shop. I think you need to ask yourself, are you invoicing out of the accounting system? Do you want to take payments out of that accounting system?
Mhm.
Or are you always going to use Stripe? In which most people think, oh, I have to connect that to QuickBooks. You don't. There's many different ways to do accounting, and it's really based on your business, and every business is unique. But are you looking to pay accounts payable out of that platform? Do they have something that works with that? What is the cost for each one of these things versus something else if you're looking at solely cost, right? I will say most of the merchant platforms, a Stripe, a Square, a QuickBooks, PayPal, gosh, I could name like 5,000 others, but whatever, are about the same price.
Mhm.
They're not significantly different. But I think from a perspective of accounts payable, you get into, you have to pay for this feature, you have to pay for that feature. And so are you mostly just paying it out of your bank account, like an automatic ACH for like dues and subscriptions for a QuickBooks or a Dubsado or ClickUp or whatever you're paying for? Or are you a larger business that needs to cut a lot of checks? And so it changes. And I think that when it comes to figuring out what that is, I kind of have a checkpoint that I go down with all of my customers that are not in an accounting software to help them determine what is best. And sometimes it's not QuickBooks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you run them through that as kind of holding their hand and really being able to meet them where they are in their exact situation and what their needs are so that you can provide them with the best recommendations and solutions.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't know what we're even looking for until somebody asks that question. They're like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And at the time of this recording, we're getting into Q4 of 2024. So getting ready to wrap up the year and getting ready to start a new year. Is there anything that business owners should keep in mind specifically at this point of the year as they get ready to close things out and begin anew when it comes to their bookkeeping and finances?
Yeah, so I can't believe how fast this year went, just as an FYI. It
Seriously.
seemed like January was just the other day, and now we're almost in October. It's
Hmm.
really crazy. It seems like some weird time warp here. But to answer your question, I think that at this point in the year, if you do not have an accounting system for the year and you thought to yourself after April 15th last year, I need to get my together and I want to hire somebody and you haven't, this is your push to do that, because we're coming into our busy season. And so typically once we get into the October, November, December, a lot of bookkeepers are filled with projects and are pushing out into the new year. The second piece of that is if you do have an accounting system and you've been in business for a few years now, my goal is always to review a year-to-date comparison with my clients at this moment to kind of see where they were last year and where they are this year so that they can go to their CPAs, if recommended, to adjust their estimated taxes or however you're paying your taxes. Because you may be making more or you may be making less, and you don't want to get hit with a large bill, and you certainly don't want to overpay. So
Yeah.
it's a fine line between just reviewing and sort of adjusting. And then I would just say, making sure that you have all of your documents as you come into the year, and maybe review what your goals are for at the beginning of the year to see where you are in Q4 to make some adjustments. I think we set these goals at the beginning of the year, right? Because it's a new year and it's a new us and we're going to do all the things. And we get to about this time and we're just so busy. We went through the summer and you're not really looking at that. And so we don't take the time to kind of look back where we wanted to be to where we are now, not for anything, but just to kind of go over what we wanted to do and try to make some adjustments and not wait until December 15th when we're like, oh, we should have done all these things and we just didn't. And, or, I thought I was going to be here and I didn't, make the adjustments with the taxes. And so I think those are some really important pieces so that, you're not surprised at the year end.
Yes, and I love that. It's kind of you're hinting at the idea of being proactive and just kind of staying on top of things and being able to analyze where you are. And I love the suggestions that you provided of comparing where you are at this point this year to last year, so that way you can make sure that you're not overpaying on your taxes or underpaying. I think that's great advice too. And I think it's also something that can be gratifying where if you're doing better than you were last year, but you didn't realize it, you can look at those numbers and be like, wow, I didn't even notice that that was happening.
Yeah, I think that's always an exciting time when you look and you're like, oh man, I'm doing good this year. On the flip side, if you're not doing as good, your industry or whatever, think back to not, don't penalize yourself for that. Think
Mm,
back to what did you do last year? Were you offering more of XYZ services and now you're not offering those services? Or what promotions were you giving in order to boost the revenue? And so sometimes it's just a way to look at things differently. People are always like, oh, I did terrible this year. Okay, but what did you do the year before so that we can kind of figure out, or what were you offering that people were not purchasing so that you can shift what services to kind of meet the demands of the market if you have the background to do that. So I think it's both, it goes kind of both ways. It's an exciting thing to see yourself doing so well. And also, if you're not doing well, it's a time to be able to reflect and look back and see how you can make a shift for Q4.
yes, I love that idea because it gives people some perspective and some insight about changes that they could make to improve, or if they're doing really well, think about ways that they can even continue to do even better than they are right now.
Agreed. Yep.
When it comes to a business owner's bookkeeping, if there's like one, I don't want to necessarily say golden rule because everyone's situation is different, but like one big piece of advice, like the hill that you would die on, what would it be when it comes to bookkeeping?
Oh gosh, that's such a hard question. Honestly, I'm going to go back to the commingling of funds.
Yeah.
I understand that, but like it is so hard as a bookkeeper. People think that we like somehow have like ESP or something. If I did, I would have hit the lottery. I would have been a millionaire and I'd be sipping margaritas on the beach somewhere. But the commingling of funds is really difficult. I don't think business
Mhm.
owners really understand what is exactly happening when they're doing that from just a financial perspective, as well as how hard it is for somebody to come in and help you if you're commingling all your funds. So
Yeah.
I think that's that in, for the love of everything, just stop using Venmo.
That is great advice too.
I dislike Venmo, and I understand that Venmo now has a business account and I get all of that. But from a business perspective, your Venmos come through as Venmos. We can't tell what they are. I can't tell whether it's coming from a personal or professional account. And it is just a struggle for us. So yeah.
Great reminder for people listening. One question I thought of, which I think kind of has to do with your work, but might not totally, is that I know when new business owners are looking to get started, and it made me think of this because of the commingling thing, is that oftentimes business owners are like, well, I don't even know what business bank to go with. Like, how do I know which bank to choose? Do you have any like qualities or things that you recommend business owners look out for when they're kind of comparing different banks and seeing which is the right option for them?
So this is a great question. I actually had this question a couple of days ago with a client, and here's what I can say. If you're commingling your funds, it would probably be best for you to find a bank that you're already banking at. So
Mm,
that way, when you're making the transfers, it's easy and seamless for you to try to move from commingling to actually just making a transfer back and forth from your bank account. And so that is the one main thing I will say. However, if that's not something that you're having an issue with, I personally, this is like just me personally, I like the smaller uh, credit unions or smaller business banks, which scare a lot of people because of the whole banking thing that happened at the beginning of this year. But you can actually ask the bank to provide data on that. To see if they're back. So I personally use Digital Federal Credit Union. I've been with them for, oh gosh, like 20 years, which is part of the reason why I went with them from a business bank, because at the beginning I needed to transfer funds. So I wasn't commingling my funds, and it just made it seamless and easy.
Mhm.
But I think, if you're banking internationally, you need to look at things like that. Again, Ashley, every business is unique. So what are you doing? Some banks aren't capable of doing certain things. So if you're banking internationally or you're traveling internationally and you want to be able to use either your business account or credit card, you need to make sure that that's available. Like, I can't go overseas without going down to DCU and filling out something to tell them I'm going to be overseas so they don't stop my card from being used. So
Mhm.
I think it's, you know, again, every business is unique from an accounting software perspective, from a banking perspective. And I think, you need to have a discussion with somebody to make sure that you're thinking about all the things when you go after that. And people hate to change banks
Yeah.
because it's a pain, right? Like, I have all my stuff auto deducting and now I have to go to a different bank and start all over again. It's not fun. So it's like one of those things where people get stuck within the bank because they don't want to change because it's difficult. So
Yes, makes sense. And that's a great point too about just starting where you're already banking to make it just a seamless transition or seamless like transactions of going from one bank account to another when you're making those like you said, those transactions and whatnot. So that's great advice there.
yeah, I think it just makes things easier, especially as like a smaller business for sure.
Absolutely. Becky, as we get closer to the end of this episode, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is what their favorite local businesses are to support. I know you're based in Hudson, so what are some of the places that you like to shop at and frequent?
Yeah, so downtown Hudson is up and coming, I would say. We have gone from basically having nobody down there to a bustling kind of place. Some of my favorite places are Serendipity, which is just a small local creative kind of store. She's got all sorts of things in there. If you're looking for a small gift for somebody, it's super cute. The Rail Trail and New Micro City, their hot fudge at Micro City, if
Oh my
anybody is a hot
gosh.
fudge person, is like amazing. Leah Owen, who is a local Discover Hudson. She does a lot of marketing for Hudson. She's fantastic. And she moved into a building downtown Hudson. I don't know, there's so many. The Evergreen Room. I mean, I can list off, all the places downtown Hudson, but anything that you come and do downtown is great. There's Medusa's if you guys like breweries, or Clover Road, which is also another brewery. So yeah, it's definitely a local happening place where you can shop or you can eat or you can shop and eat and also get your marketing.
I love that. Becky, this has been such a fun episode, and I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to have you come on the show and interview you. And now I'd love it if you could share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect with you further.
Awesome. Yeah. So Instagram and LinkedIn are probably my two places. I'm also on Facebook. My social is at Balanced Office Solutions. And for LinkedIn, it is, I believe, under Rebecca Nelson, even though I go by Becky. Or they can go on my website, which is balancedofficesolutions.com, and reach out anytime. Happy to help.
Amazing. I will link to those places in the show notes. That way our listeners can click through and connect with you from there. But thank you so much again for coming on today's show.
Thanks, Ashley. I really appreciate it.